I just thought it was fantastic.
There you go.
I loved it to pieces, and I will try and kind of every time I start thinking about it, I just burst into a stupid smile. And I've been saying to people, people they go, which do they go? I go, it's just fabulous. Okay, so nuts and bolts stuff. Firstly, as you say quite right, it's a musical. It's not a biopic. I mean, it may have a biographical, line to it, but it is a musical. And so it uses its jukebox selection of songs on shuffle to fit the mood rather than the timeline. So we immediately get over the Bohemian Rhapsody issue of that song's not at that gig and the Mott the Hoople tour, where's that? It's just all that's out of the way. It's like there's a big jukebox and we're hitting all these things separately to match the mood. That's the first thing. Also, the structure that it has, the confessional structure of him walking, dressed as the demon, walking into the rehab and then looking back on his life. It reminded me of the structure of Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll, which was the Ian Dury thing, in which it's a vaudevillian performance, in which he's on stage, sort of ringmastering the life around him. And I think that unreliable narrator telling their story actually is a very good device for telling a story in which you don't want to go detail by detail. You want to use the songs to create this kind of this collage. I think in terms of direction, it is fantastically confident. It has, I do think that I loved Sunshine on Leith. We showed Sunshine on Leith in Shetland, and it was the third or fourth time I've seen it, and I sobbed all the way through it. And I think Dexter Fletcher is, let's be clear about this, a genius. I think he is somebody who actually understands how musicals work and what musicals can look like. And we all know that Dexter Fletcher saved Bohemian Rhapsody, but this is his film. This is the film in which he's doing the thing that Dexter Fletcher can do. And I think you look at the confidence of a sequence like The Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting, which takes us in this leapfrog from childhood to adulthood via this fairground dance that reminded me of the front cover of the first Darts album. And it's not just that it's superbly choreographed, it's that it is breathtakingly confident. It's like the director is taking you by the hand and saying, I got this is fine, here we go, come with me, this is going to work. I also think that Egerton is terrific in it. Taron Egerton is terrific. Is it Taron or Taron?
Taron. Well, I don't know. I called him Taron when I met him. He didn't tell me off.
I think he's really great for two reasons. Firstly, one of the weird things about Elton John is that he was one of the most vulnerable icons of the glam era, that he had that dual thing that on the one hand it was chest forward, he often wore outfits which actually put his chest forward, but he also had the thing of the boy hiding behind the glasses. And there's a whole thing going on in the film about him having to play act being confident, about him being an introverted extrovert, about this whole thing about, as a child, when are you going to hug me? And actually the whole film is really the story of somebody in need of a hug. It's somebody who wants to, I want love. That's kind of the underlying theme of it. And what Egerton gets is that mixture of bravado, but also that sense that behind it there is something reticent and worried. I loved the way the film acknowledged and understood modern musicals. Ken Russell obviously did Tommy, and there is a very strong Dexter Fletcher, Derek Jarman, Ken Russell connection anyway. So I was looking at things like the sequences that evoke MGM musicals, and it's not making me think of MGM musicals, it's making me think of The Boyfriend, which evoked MGM musicals. I'm looking at the Fantasia fireworks sequences, and I'm thinking of Altered States. I'm looking at that kind of weird writhing disco thing with the overhead shot of the writhing bodies, and I'm thinking of the sequence from The Devils. That kind of Ken Russell sense of the marriage of visuals and music, and that sense of excess is there. But what it's married to is the intimacy of the central relationship, which is a love story, but not in that way, as they say very clearly, between Elton John and Bernie Taupin. Now, bear in mind, my favourite Elton John album is Captain Fantastic, which I love because I love the autobiographical element. I love the thing about the story of their life together, of them writing, of Bitter Fingers, of them in cafes. And I think that what's great about Rocketman is that for all its flamboyant, spangly excess, you do get that sense. That scene when they're in the cafe and they're having the conversation about how much they love Streets of Florida and how much Bernie Taupin has got these kind of cowboy fantasies. I think that's beautifully done because it's the quiet intimacy at the center of this kind of exploding thing. And if you get that wrong, if you don't get that, everything else will fall apart. Then, of course, you have Stephen Graham, and I am going to spend the rest of my life going, I'm going to have a massage every time something, because he doesn't have a huge amount of lines, but every single one of them, he makes the most of. And he looks like, and you said this very intuitively last week, he looks like he is enjoying himself.
Oh, absolutely.
He looks like he's having a really, really good time. And the other thing that it reminded me of, and quite often...
He plays Dick James. From
Dick James Music, yeah. And I know that, as a film critic, what I'm getting here is I'm trying to marry my sense of just wanting to go, it's brilliant, it's brilliant, it's brilliant, and also making sense of it as a critic. And often what happens to me is the films that I really love, what I love is that they remind me of other things. Not that they're ripping other things off, but they're reminding me of the feelings of that. And there is a sense in it that also reminded me of Bob Fosse's All That Jazz. It's showtime. The whole story about the central character played by Roy Scheider, who is basically on his deathbed, but having these kind of fantasias, and it goes from hospital to stage. And there is a sequence in Rocketman in which it goes from ambulance gurney to stage. And there's also a gesture that Taron Egerton does, which is putting on the smile, which is the laughing through the tears thing, the looking and thing going bing, and then suddenly walking out, and it's Dodger Stadium, wherever it is, and whacking the ball with a baseball bat. So all those things are going on, and it would be so easy to get it wrong. It would be so easy to, to drop the ball with a story that's got so many things going on in it. But I was a huge Elton John fan, particularly of that period. As I said, during the 70s, I did buy every single album. And again, that's the problem, because you think, well, that's when you're going to tread on people's toes. That's when, the Bohemian Rhapsody thing, well, if you know that there's that album before that album, that gets you confused. But so as a film critic and looking at the movies it reminded me of, I think, great. Dexter Fletcher is somebody who understands that lineage of musicals. As somebody and it's a musical, it's a proud musical. As somebody who just likes it from a performance point of view, the performances are really great, and Taron Egerton is right at the centre of that. But the supporting performances, whether it's Bryce Dallas Howard, who Hands in the Air, I didn't recognise for the first half of the movie. I didn't even realise that's who it was. And then beneath all of that, underneath all of that, behind all of that, I just want to go, it's fabulous and I love it and I want to go see it again. And I just lose any sense of reasonable critical faculty.
You're hyperventilating, in fact.
I just loved it.